Share content screen. Okay, do you see the screen?
Yes, we do.
Perfect.
Okay,
Not anymore.
good.
No, we don't see it anymore.
Now, you
Okay.
don't see it anymore? Hello?
You see it now?
I
You do see it.
I see it's perfect.
Okay, you see it? So, okay, so it's mute. Okay, everybody, please mute yourself. Okay. We're still not all muted.
Oh, sorry, I've lost it. Where are we? Oh, I've lost it.
Okay, hang on, hang on. Oh, you're all muted. Okay. Okay, we're going to learn a piece from the Shevilei Pinchas. On this week's Parsha, we are introduced to the Shema Yisrael. And the first chapter and the first word, Shema Yisrael. The Gemara gives us the source for Shema Yisrael. Before Yaakov passed away, he was afraid that maybe some of his sons had some issues in Amunah, and they all said to Yaakov, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. And he was very happy to hear that. And then he responded, Baruch Shem Kivod Malchuso Liolam Voed. So you see that Yaakov really, from his time already, it was the Shema Yisrael, plus his response of Baruch Shem Kivod Malchuso Liolam Voed. The Gemara goes on and discusses, so what do we do, when we say the Shema? Do we say with Baruch Shem or not? So they say, well, listen, the son said Shema Yisrael, and Yaakov responded, Baruch Shem Kavod Malchus Olam V'ed. However, in this week's Parsha, the Torah written by Moshe just says Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. Then it goes on to V'ahavtas Hashem Elokecha. Does not say Baruch Shem Kavod. So what do? So the Gemara discusses that they said, you know what? We say Shema Yisrael. Moshe didn't say Baruch Shem, but Yaakov did, so we'll whisper Baruch Shem. Then the Gemara gives an analogy to a princess who's smelling some really enticing type of food, but for her to ask for some yummy food that smells from the kitchen, it's not distinguished for such a woman to do that, to just say that you're giving into your desires. But if she doesn't ask for it, she'll be in pain. So what happened? So the maid servants gave it to her very quietly, without a lot of discussion. So somehow that's supposed to explain why we say the Baruch Shem quietly. So the Shevilei Pinchas asks, so what's going on? If Moshe did not say Baruch Shem Kivod, so then why do we say it? I understand that Yaakov said it, but Moshe wrote in the Torah without Baruch Shem. So why do we say it when we say the Shema? And how does this analogy of the princess wanting some foods, but she has to ask for it privately, how does that fit into our discussion? So now if you're following along, we're in the middle column, right in the middle where I have the red underline, Orach Chaim HaKodesh. So in this week's Parsha, on the words, Ve'ahavta es Hashem Elokecha, the Orach Chaim HaKodesh notices, look in the bold, right in the middll, he says, Ve and you shall love, meaning it's adding something. The Vav must be adding something. So what's it adding? So he's saying that, besides the mitzvah of saying Shema Yisrael, which we said in the pasuk before, there's the mitzvah of loving Hashem. But then the Orach Chaim says to tell us a very important rule, that a person cannot achieve love of Hashem unless he first has fear of Hashem. So it says, Ve'ahavta, and you shall love. But the Vav is adding that what? That first you have to have fear of Hashem. And now when you have fear of Hashem, then you can have love of Hashem. And that's how you can come to being close to Hashem. So at the very bottom, he asks, doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. Where in the Shema does it say to fear Hashem that we could say the Vav of Ahavta is telling us to add to the fear, to the love is the fear of Hashem. It doesn't say anywhere in the Shema in that line to fear Hashem. So where does he get this from? So we're on the left-hand column now. So to explain this, the Shevilei Pinchas discusses another mitzvah, and we've learned this in Maseches Brachas already. It says if a person reads the Shema and doesn't have, he's not thinking about it and understanding it, in the first pasuk of Shema Yisrael, he has not discharged his obligation. But if he has kavanah in the Shema and he doesn't have the rest, then that's okay. So if you have to have kavanah for this first pasuk of Shema Yisrael, so let's try to understand what does that mean exactly. So moving along on the left hand, I'm saying it outside so I can make sure I get most of it in. I'll read something inside when we have a more important issue. So the Shevilei Pinchas gets into the deeper understanding. What is the Shema Yisrael telling us? So he brings the Zohar, and it's right by the red underlines near the upper left-hand side. He says, Oraisa below techila rechima lo parachta la'ela. He says, Torah without fear and love doesn't fly above. Meaning to say, Torah and mitzvahs are meant to rise up and connect us to Hashem. But if you don't have love and fear are like wings that let it ascend. If you don't have love and fear when you're learning Torah and doing mitzvahs, you don't really have the wings to bring it up to ascend to Hashem. So let's try to understand what is the idea of the love and fear. So he brings a beautiful idea from the Magid of Mezrich, as we underlined over there, the Magid HaKodesh Harav Dov Bermi Mezrich, right at the very top left-hand side there. He says, Yisod v'shoras avodas Hashem Yisbarach. The foundation of serving Hashem is liyira ulahav v'shmo Yisbarach, to fear and love Hashem. Uv'chol makom. Then he says, you got to know, hayira kodemes la'ava. Fear has to come before love. Shemi kodem tzarich liyira Hashem. First, you have fear from Hashem. We're going up to the next page on the right-hand side. And that's what he says. A person has to make a lot of efforts to have fear of Hashem on his face. And then he says a great chiddush. If you really have real fear of Hashem, the proper type of fear of Hashem that we discussed in the past, to us, then the love will just come automatically afterwards. How's that? Since he purifies himself to have fear of Hashem, as we've discussed in the Nesiva Shalom, the fear of Hashem is you're afraid to let go of Hashem because you know that you don't have anything from your own and everything depends on Hashem. If you have that very high level of fear of Hashem, you will merit Socha Kam Kain Love Hashem. It'll automatically spin into love. An incredible idea that once you have the real fear, not the fear of punishment, but the fear that you understand that everything you have is from Hashem. Your whole life is from Hashem. Hashem is your respirator. And what you're afraid of is you're afraid to let go of that respirator. And the more you hang on to that respirator and you see how wonderful Hashem is to you, you will automatically come to love. And he brings a proof to that. I don't have time to get into that. And this explains another Gemara, upper right-hand side. In the pasuk when the Torah says, Va'ata Yisrael ma Hashem elokecha shomimach. The pasuk in a few parshas from now says, what does Hashem want from you? Ki'im liyira, just to fear him. And then it goes on to say a bunch of other things in the pasuk, to serve him, follow his ways, blah, blah, to love Hashem, etc. So Gemara asks, is fear of Hashem such a small thing? We already said that it's a very big thing. It's an Hashem's treasured house. It's not an easy thing. Gemara says, yeah, for Moshe Rabbeinu, it's an easy thing. So the point of the matter is, if you look at the pasuk, look at the upper right hand says, it says, V'ato Yisrael ma Hashem elokecha shomach. What does Hashem ask you? Kim liyiras Hashem elokecha, to love Hashem, to go in those ways, and to love him. So therefore, how does the Gemara answers that it's only to fear? For Moshe, fear is a small thing. But what about the love? You also have to love Hashem. Is that such a simple thing too? So based on we said from the Mezrich Remagid, it makes a lot of sense now. Why? Because once you fear Hashem and you do a good job of strengthening yourself to fear Hashem, then the love Hashem will call automatically. And that's what he brings in the next set of underlines. The Sefer Haredim says, a person strengthens himself in proper fear of Hashem. Consequently, he will just automatically spill into love. And that's what the pasuk says. And what does Hashem ask you? But to fear Hashem, and then then it says to love him. Klomer, meaning to say, I'm not asking from you. Strengthen yourself in fear. Then you're going to come to love. What he is explaining is like this. The pasuk was saying, listen, all I'm asking you to do is to fear Hashem. But there's a whole bunch of other things said afterwards. And the Gemara seems to only deal with fear of Hashem. You think fear of Hashem is an easy thing? Why didn't the Gemara ask, loving Hashem, is that an easy thing? Going in His way, is that an easy thing? So we're explaining that based on what the Maggid of Mesrich said, is once you really, really work on fearing Hashem the proper way, an elevated type of fear, love comes consequently. So now, if you look at the bottom of the second column, right over there, we have a fascinating vort from Shimon from Aspropoli. And this is so cool. And that's why you need a picture. You're going to see on the left side. You see this picture over here? You see the 4 boxes? Now, if you look at the 2 boxes on the top, it's a yud and a resh and an aleph and a hey. That spells yira, fear. If you look at the 2 boxes on the bottom, there's an aleph and an h, a hey, and a vase and a hey, which spells ava. Now, if you put yira on top of ava, no matter how you slice it, yira turns into ava. What do I mean? Look at the top right-hand box. It's a yud resh. If you go across, aleph hey is yira, is fear. But if you go below where there's ava, you go down, the yud resh connects to the aleph hey, and it's also yira. And if you go over to the left side, the left top box, that's aleph hey, you go straight down, you get ava both ways as well. Wow, that's an amazing thing. Do you see what's going on over here? If you put yira on top of ava, you start with the yud resh, whichever way you go, it's going to be yira across and yira down. But then when you have the ava, you take ava down, it's ava, and you go across, it spells ava. So what do you see? But if you flip it around, I don't have a picture of it, you put ava on the top and yira on the bottom, this doesn't work. So therefore, that's a tremendous hint that yira has to come before ava. If yira's on the top and ava's on the bottom, then no matter how you slice it, you'll have yira and ava going both directions. If you have ava first, no guarantee there's going to be yira. Whoa, what an incredible idea. And that's the idea. If you really work on your yira shemayim, avas Hashem, not the low level. If just fearing Hashem for punishment, you'll never love it. But if you have the real yira, as all mitzvahs are supposed to connect you to Hashem, even yira, and yira means you understand the reality that Hashem is so kind that He gives you life on a constant basis. And you know you're only afraid to do something that would disconnect you from that. But that shows you how precious Hashem is, and of course you're going to come to love. So that's an amazing concept, that you have to have yira before the av. So now we move to the next page. So what's the idea of Shema Yisrael? So if you look at the next set of underlines, you're going to see that when we say Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, what is this? Shu Kabbalas Ol Malchus Shemayim. It's the acceptance of the yoke of heaven. We know that. And the goal is to arouse a person. And here's the vort. What does it mean that you have Kabbalas Ol Malchus Shemayim? You accept the yoke of heaven? That if you accept the yoke of heaven, that means you've developed the concept of Yira Shemayim. And in the next paragraph, he brings from the Maral. He says, Shein Suffolk, there's no doubt. Ki Shema Yisrael, Shu Kabbalas Malchus Shemayim. That's the accepting of the yoke of heaven. Shu Yiraso Yisparach. This is the fear of Hashem. Why? Ki Malchus Basar Adam Yesh Lo Mara Malchus. Because even in a flesh and blood kingdom, there's something of, reverence for the kingdom. How could the kingdom of heaven has to be the same thing? Then after the fear, it says, then it says you should love Hashem your God. Okay, so it comes out what the Maral is explaining, that the sentence of Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, And if that is, as the Gemara calls it, accepting the yoke of heaven, so if you're accepting the yoke of heaven, that has to come with a certain degree of fear, that you understand that you have a ruler over you that you're going to be listening to. Now, with this below, we can explain on the lower right hand Sam, where the Gemara also says, Rabbi Eliezer's opinion, you have to have kavanah in the first two psukim of Shema Yisrael and V'ahavtas Hashem Elokecha. And then stop. You don't have to have any more kavanah. And why is that? Because then, by saying Shema, you have fear. And then when you have V'ahavta, you have love. That's the idea, that you're finding the fear and the love that are together, based on how the Maral is explaining, and based how Tosfos also explains it, that he's saying they have the love and the fear. Now, without the Maral, we wouldn't have known where's this idea. But now that we're saying that accepting the yoke of heaven means to have fear, so we see now, when you're saying Shema Yisrael, that's showing you have fear of Hashem. V'ahavta means you love Hashem. That explains to Or Chaim, who says that the Vav of V'ahavta is including, and there was fear of Hashem. And we ask, where's the fear of Hashem? And the answer is now, Shema Yisrael itself is serving Hashem with the absolute fear of Hashem. Now, with this, so that explains our time. Now we'll take it a step further. On the left-hand side by the underlines, it brings down from the Balatanya, why do you have to have so much kavanah when you're saying the Shema? And if you don't, it's not like you have fulfilled the mitzvah. So he says, we know the rule is, he says, the whole goal of the world is to reveal the kingdom of Hashem, the ein melech b'loam. There's no such thing as a king without a nation. Moving on to the next page, on the right side, what does it mean to be a melech? There's two things. There's a melech and a moshel. Melech is a king and a moshel is a ruler. The difference is a ruler can rule you by force. You may not want him. He conquers you. He forces you to be his subjects. A melech means that the people willingly accept it. So how can you be a melech? There's no such thing as a melech unless the people have accepted you as their king. So therefore, the point is that we make Hashem a king. And how do we make Hashem a king? By willingly accepting the yoke of heaven. And that's as we say at night. Tonight we're going to say, Umalchuso b'ratzon kiblu alehem. We accepted God's kingdom b'ratzon. It was our desire. We wanted to accept it. So now what happens when you're saying the Shema, we are accepting the yoke of heaven. So if you accept the yoke of heaven, you better understand what you're saying, that there's a concept that Hashem's the melech. If we don't have kavanah in that pasuk, we have not coordinated him. Meaning to say, if you just say the Shema, you don't understand what you're saying, or you know, but you're not thinking, you're not concentrating, how have you coronated the king? So therefore, you have to understand what you're saying, and your understanding is saying, I understand he's the king. I understand by him being the king, he gives me everything that I have, and I understand that he's my respirator. I accept that willingly, and that is the definition of Yiras Shamayim. And as we explained from the Mesrich Magen, once you come to total Yiras Shamayim, then Ava becomes the gift that you had. Now, let's put this all together and understand the difference between Moshe Rabbeinu and Yaakov Avinu. So in the middle of the next column, it says like this. Yaakov, he hears the son say Shema Yisrael. That's amazing. That's accepting the yoke of heaven. That's an amazing thing. You're contemplating. You want to accept Hashem as your king. You're developing proper yira, that you understand that you know he's the source of your existence, and you want him to continue to give you existence. You coronating him. You have kavanah for all this. And Yaakov says, boy, that's so great that you guys are saying this. But look at this underline in the middle. But Yaakov saw Roa Baruach HaKodesh. He saw with Ruach HaKodesh. Shiu b'neim ke'ela. He says, that's good. It's beautiful that you guys are accepting it. But we're going to go into Gullus. Life's going to be tough. So he says, Shebiglau tirdas hazman. Because of the difficulties of time, Golios and the exiles, we're not going to necessarily coordinate Hashem so properly with that first pasuk. Meaning to say, we're so busy, we have business on our mind, we're afraid of a lot of things. Sometimes you're just saying the Shema, we don't know what we're saying. But you're saying the Shema, but you're really not putting your mind to it, so you're really not coordinating it. So he says a great idea. What happens if by mistake you say Hashem's name in vain? What do? We say Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuso Li'olam V'ed. to make up for that. So what happened? When Yaakov heard the son saying, Shema Yisrael, he said, oh, it's a beautiful thing. But Yaakov, he sees the future. And he sees in the future, not all his children, his great-great-grandchildren are going to say Shema with the right feelings. As a matter of fact, they may say Shema, they may have their doubts about HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So therefore, he then added, Baruch Shem Kavod Machuso, Kidei Lechaper Bakach, to atone, Ala Pagam Bekavod Machus Shemaim, if we blemish the honor of Hashem, Shal Kiblu Machuso Bekavona Riyah B'Posik Shema Yisrael, when we say the Shema without proper Kavana. So that's just like what says in the Shulchan Aruch. If you make a wasted bracha, you say Baruch Shem Kavod Machuso. Meaning to say, Yaakov understood that yes, Shema Yisrael is powerful. It's mamish accepting the yoke of heaven. Hashem is only your king if you willingly accept it. And therefore you have to have kavanah. And kavanah just doesn't mean kavanah when you're saying it, but you really mean it. You really aren't fooling around, and you really believe that Hashem is your respirator. That's what you're really saying when you're Shema, but you got to think about that. And Yaakov says it's beautiful. But Yaakov is saying, I don't know if all my children are ever going to be on that level. They may be Orthodox Jews, but they don't really think about this so much. And they don't really actively accept the yoke of heaven. So in case they're not saying it with proper intent, we should fix it up by saying, Baruch Shem Kavod Malchus Soli Olam V'ed. That's what Yaakov had in mind. However, Moshe Rabbeinu, when he is writing in the Torah what Hashem expects from us, he's writing it the way it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. The Torah is what you're really supposed to do. Yaakov and his sons, they were bringing it into reality. But when Hashem says Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Echad, you got to have it right. And therefore, Moshe would never think of putting in Baruch Shem Kavod Malchus Omled. You mean to write in the Torah that, in case you didn't do it right. Do we have anywhere else in the Torah that in case you don't do it right, we'll give you another default position? Honor your father and mother. And if you don't do it so right, I'll give you another backup plan. The Torah gives it the way it's supposed to be. So Moshe Rabbeinu says, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. Period. That's accepting the yoke of heaven. But when Yaakov, as a father to his children and giving them guidance, and they say Shema Yisrael, so good. But I don't know, in case you're having trouble, add on Baruch Shem Kavod Malchus Soli Olam V'ed. And that's what, look at the bottom now. So that's when the Gemara is asking. So what are we going to do? Are we going to say Baruch Shem? Yaakov said it, but Moshe didn't say it. So let's look at the last columns over here. The last column. So what are we going to do? So what do they do? Let's say it quietly. So let's look at the underlines. So Haras Bakach. So what do we do when you say it quietly? We really want to say Shema the right way. Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. To really understand what that means, and Hashem is our respirator. Hashem does everything for us, all the proper kavanas. We really do, and we say it out loud. Ela should be pasa busha, but because we're a bit ashamed, because sometimes shelo kibalnu al malchus shemayim karoi. Sometimes we don't accept the yoke of heaven properly. So we say quietly, Baruch Shem Kavod Malchus Olam V'ed Hashem. I'm really sorry if I can't really say it in the best way possible. And that's the analogy with the princess. She wants to have sweet foods. And if she's going to say she wants it, it's a little bit of a embarrassment. If she doesn't say, she doesn't get, she's going to be in pain. So they said, what? Let her bring it quietly. What's the nimshal? He says, Ki mitzad echad, on the one hand, on Mishteg and Lomer, we want to say, Baruch Shem Kavod Malchus Olam V'ed. We want to say it. Why? We want kapara for not having the best kavanas. We don't always really believe that Hashem is in charge of everything. So we'd like to say Baruch Shem, to say, I didn't really say it well, and accept it this way. That's what we'd like to do. But that's an embarrassment. Aren't you embarrassed to say it that way? Wouldn't it be better to say the Malchus Shemaim properly, Karoi, in the first pasuk? Therefore, they established to say it quietly. The point is, it's more than just saying. It's more than just saying. Of course, it's the saying, but every day in our lives, we can be makabel ol malchus shemayim. Yes, twice a day we say Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. As we said this morning, if you're willing to give up your life, Well, if you really mean it, you really, really mean you're willing to die for Hashem, well, that's real proper Yiras Shamayim. That's the real accepting the yoke of heaven. And then you get the gift of Haftas Hashem Elokecha b'chol levav v'chol nafshecha. And then the gift of loving Hashem will come and follow. And that's the way Jews really supposed to be. But can we be honest with ourselves? Are we always like that? A lot of times we just want to get by saying it, but we don't always mean it. And then if you're saying you don't always mean it, then what have you been saying? So just like when you make the wrong bracha and you said Hashem's name and face, okay, Baruch Shem Kavod Malchus Olam V'ed. I hope that fixes it up. But you want to just go around saying, I say Shema Yisrael, but I really don't believe it? We're stickle embarrassed, no? And therefore, we have to say it quietly. We have to say it quietly. Because if we say it out loud, it means, we don't really have to hold of Hashem so much. I can really say it and not mean it. And I'll always fix it up with Baruch Shem Kavod Malchus Olam V'ed. That's not the way it's meant to be. But Yaakov understood. In other words, what you're saying is when you say God's name in vain, that means you really weren't so careful with God's honor. So you say, I'm sorry. Like Baruch Shem is almost like saying, I'm sorry. I wish I would have said it better. In a regular bracha, you say, bracha levatala. Okay, I should have had more kavanah when I said it. So now I'm saying God's name should be eternally great. So I'm backing it up. I'm fixing it up afterwards. But that's not the way life should initially be. Life initially should be that you get it right the first time. And that's the message, as we said earlier today, that Shema Yisrael, willing to be Mekadosh Shem Shamayim. And when do we reach this highest level? By Musaf tomorrow, by the Kedusha. When we give the crown to the king, and we give the crown to the king, and we say, Shema Yisrael, Hashem, we're willing to give our lives. We really mean it. We have awesome fear for you. We are willing to understand that you are our respirator. And that should be an amazing level. And really, 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 we should never have to say Baruch Shem Kavod Malchus Olam V'ed, because that would mean we didn't say it properly. But on the other hand, can we really, really be so sure we're going to really give up our lives like that? Are we really willing to sacrifice in so many ways? It's not just giving up your life, but just listening to Hashem, doing things Hashem asks you to do that you say, I'd rather die than do this. A lot of times we say it, but do we really mean it? And Baruch Shem says, I may be talking the talk, but I don't know if I'll walk the walk. And Baruch Shem is like an expression of, I hope I'll be able to walk the walk. I don't know. And that's why we say it quietly. We say Shema Yisrael out loud. We hope that we are willing to accept all the decrees that Hashem places on us. But you never know. So it's interesting, guys. Think about this. Yes, twice a day we say Shema Yisrael with Baruch Shem. Yes. But when we take out the Torah on Shabbos, we just say Shema Yisrael and no Baruch Shem. By Musaf, we say Shema Yisrael and we don't say Baruch Shem by Kedusha. It's possible we could say, I'm saying this on my own. It's possible when you reach Shabbos and you go through Shabbos and you experience Shabbos the way it's meant to be experienced. And now you're coming to the high point of Shabbos, of Kedusha, and you're giving the crown to the king. We hope that we really have said Shema Yisrael properly. We don't say a soft Baruch Shem Kavod Malchus Olam V'ed. We don't need to say a soft Baruch Shem Kavod Malchus Olam V'ed, because we've come to the level of saying Shema in the most proper way. And we totally understand Hashem, after going through a Shabbos, we really mean what we say. And then we don't even have to say anything else. It's all said for us. And the love will come by itself. And I don't have to say, maybe I really didn't mean it. I'm sorry. Maybe Baruch Shem. We should always hope that we reach that level. Hashem should help us to have the real fear of Hashem, to know that He is supplying everything. 6 days of the week, He created the world, and nobody creates anything. And even though I think I'm a creator, but on Shabbos, I give it all to Hashem. We should be zoicha to say Shema properly without needing the Baruch Shem. And that's exactly what Moshe Rabbeinu wants us to do. Okay, shkayach everybody. Have an amazing Shabbos. And we'll see you later.
Thank you.
Everybody.
Shabbos, everybody. Shalom.
Shabbos, everybody.
Sei gesund. Shkayach. Shkayach.